Those emotions are supposed to be guides. They are not supposed to be distractions. Somewhere along the line, writing became more than just storytelling for me.
Have you ever wondered how writing can support your well-being? Join us on Grafto, the Power of Writing podcast, where we explore the transformative power of words. I'm your host, Alina Maragelis, and together with our amazing guests, we'll delve into the world of writing and its incredible benefits. So today I'm joined by Dr. Buki Akilapa, who is an educator, researcher, and writer, originally from Nigeria, deeply driven by the transformative power of storytelling. She is passionate about amplifying the voices of marginalized groups and advancing DEI. Her doctorate focused on autoethnography to illuminate the lived experiences of Black women navigating migration, race, and higher education in the UK. Drawing on her personal and professional journey, Buki elaborates themes of identity, belonging, and cultural change through reflecting writing and soul work. As a board of director at the Lapidus International, Buki champions creative and therapeutic writing practices, viewing writing as a means of healing, resistance, and transformation. Well, first of all, Buki, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for the warm introduction.
Yes, I'm very happy to have you here, and I was looking forward to our conversation. And perhaps let's start. How has writing, particularly autoethnography and soul work, enabled you to, navigate the intersection of your Nigerian heritage and your experience in British academia? And perhaps we can start to tell our audience what is autoethnography.
Good, thank you. Thank you very much. So, according to Ellis et al. 2011, autoethnography connects the personal to the cultural while telling your own story situated within a broader and a social political context. And for soul work, according to Dex 2000, it describes it as a deep reflective process that listens to the emotional and even the unconscious parts of our lives. And together, autoethnography and soul work has helped me to navigate between the in-between lines, which Beach 2011 also describes as a space where you are neither fully in one place or you're neither fully in another. And me migrating from Nigeria in 2008 with my husband to the UK has made me experience liminality in multiple times and in so many different ways. This brings to my mind a learning activity that I did on my education doctorate program. It was the Module 4 learning activity. And during the activity, the module leader displays placed different pictures that represented different aspects of life, and it included pictures that related to sports, nature, literature, and even LGBTQ, and some abstract pictures as well. And from that table, she asked us to pick a picture that best describes how we were feeling at that point during the education doctorate program. And I looked at the table and I was wondering what I was going to pick and what I was going to say. And one picture that had an African print caught my attention, and I felt, oh, I'm going to take that picture because first of all, it represented my African culture and it has lots of colors on it, like from an African print, and I could relate to it being my multiple identity or identities, and I was very hesitant to pick the for me to kind of talk about how I was feeling because I was shy and I didn't have enough confidence being part of the group and to kind of speak at that time. But I allowed everyone to take their turns, and I was thinking there won't be enough time for me to have my own turn. And she would say, "Okay, next time." But she was so patient, and I was one of
Couldn't
the
escape.
last people that took my the picture to speak. And I told the group that chosen this picture because it represents African print, and at that time representation mattered. And I said, sometimes coming when the thoughts that have come from a different cultural background becomes overwhelming, I struggle with my confidence and I struggle with my self-esteem. But at that time, I was so pleased to see that African print and the multiples identity that I bring with me sometimes makes me feel out of place and sometimes makes me feel like or struggle with my sense of belonging. But after that activity, I felt a sign of relief that my different cultural background have given me a form of uniqueness for me to engage in that activity. And that space became a transitional space where I felt that my cultural background was valued. And since then, I just felt that that learning activity became the pivotal point where I thought that it was good for me to explore how my Nigerian culture has influenced my learning journey on the education and doctorate program from a cultural perspective. And that's why I chose autoethnography. And so work in itself helped me to reconcile my past and my present.
Wow. And thank you for your vulnerability there, Buki. And because I think many people will relate with your story. And it's important to know and share this story and stories. And in your journey of, let's say, reclaiming your voice, how have you balanced vulnerability and strength when sharing narratives that perhaps confront systematic inequalities and cultural silences?
This brings to my mind again the first time I ate with knife and fork at a work's Christmas party. That night, using knife and fork became a very concern for me very quickly because that was the first time I had the privilege to go out with my colleagues to eat during the festive period. Because before then, because that was in 2015. But before then, I was working in different care roles, and me and my colleagues then didn't go or attend any Christmas parties. But this time I was an NVQ assessor, what some people know now as apprenticeship assessor. And I felt like I wanted to join my colleagues then to a Christmas party dinner. But when the food came, I didn't know which hand to use the knife or which hand to use to hold the fork. And I was kind of paying attention to my other colleagues and seeing what they were doing. So at different times, I'll swap the knife and the fork and trying to hold it and like have control of it. But I struggled holding any of the cutlery in my left hand because from my Nigerian culture when I was growing up, we were not allowed to put our left hand on the table to eat our food. So it was only the right hand. So having control of the knife and fork in both hands was very tricky. At some point I mistakenly dropped the knife on the floor, and I was like, ooh, they didn't kind of do their risk assessment before giving me the knife to hold at the table. But eventually I just apologized, kept the knife on the table and just used my fork. But someone will say, oh, why can't you use knife and fork to eat? But from my when I was growing up, using spoons were what we were using, not knife and fork. And someone might feel like it's a basic skill in their own culture. Why is it so difficult for another person to use knife and fork? So over time, I realized that some things that some people might feel like, oh, it's supposed to be normal or it's supposed to be basic, it might be difficult for someone else from another culture because they don't have the cultural background or the family experiences to that will help them to be able to like use those skills or use the knowledge that someone else will feel that is easy for them to use based on their own existing knowledge or existing background. So some things, some people might feel, oh, that person lacks intelligence or that person lacks knowledge, might not necessarily be something that relates to knowledge or intelligence, because is culture is related or associated to culture. So that's why over time, all my practice, my learning, my own experiences of my cultural background have made me to kind of promote inclusive practices that recognizes the differences in other people, because everybody starts from a cultural points of view while they're growing up, and their confidence to use any skills or any habits they've developed from their cultural background. And we should encourage people to be free and comfortable to explore or to learn new things that are not associated to their own cultural background in safe places.
Yeah, wow. Thank you for that powerful story. And I think hopefully with this story, people will now be more aware in those setups to be mindful about these things and how they can view the others as well. Very powerful, Buki.
Thank
And
you.
reflecting on your childhood in Nigeria, what early experiences as a girl child shaped your ideas of identity and belonging?
Yeah. While I was growing up, I was born and brought up in Nigeria until 2008 when I migrated to England. But growing up in a patriarchal society such as Nigerian made me to be caught in like between two worlds. My Nigerian culture kind of told girls to play secondary roles, like, oh, be with your mom in the kitchen, do the dishes, do the house chores, do this, do that. Yeah. But my dad was very passionate about educating his daughters. I had five sisters, so we're six altogether, and we don't have a boy in our house. But my dad was always proud to tell his friends about his daughters that were doing really well, were educated, were this, with that. And whilst I was growing up, it felt like when you grow older, you need to kind of have a respectable career, such as being a doctor, being an engineer, being a lawyer. And if you were not in any of like the prestigious careers, you're not like doing anything kind of good enough. And most times the male children or the men are encouraged to go that way, and the women are kind of asked to kind of be in roles that doesn't make them be in public eye too much and things like that. But my dad was always passionate and pushing us, like, you have to do well at school because you have to be independent when you grow older. And my mom was our role model because my mom worked in the bank for 36 years. So all my life, I knew that she was going to work. She was championing being a role model for her daughters and for all those that were around her. But there was this societal contradictions that shaped my resilience from an early age as well, teaching me how to kind of behave in public. So, for example, they say it takes a society to raise a child. So even if my dad had those passion of us being educated and all of that in public, when we go out as young children, you see the neighbors even telling us of stop shouting or stop doing this, sit down properly, you're supposed to close your legs as girl, they're kind of making you feel groomed for when you're going to be a marriage material. If you shout or if you laugh too loud, you're not going to get a husband. So right from an early age, the thoughts of me being a quiet woman, being a silent woman, keeping my voice down, sitting in a particular way, not to take up too much space, was what was occupying my mind. That was part of my childhood from an early age. And in that sense, you could see that the gender defines who a woman will be from an early age. And you see the girl children will copy their moms most times. And me copying what my mom was doing and me copying what the society was telling me as well was kind of sometimes contradictory and was kind of sometimes conflicting. But I had to also comply with the unspoken norms, with the unspoken rules. and how and the same applies to male children as well. They will copy their dad to see how they treat the women and see how they take up more space and how they take up more dominant roles in families and in society as at large. But I was so fortunate at the time that my parents brought us up with the belief that women should be respected as like men.
Wow. And I think, Buki, thank you for sharing that, because I think many women will relate to this.
Mm.
And how has engaging in soul work through writing transformed your understanding of self worth and belonging, both professionally and personally?
For several years, I suffered with inferiority complex, especially when I migrated to England. I felt like, oh, I don't have the right skin color, I don't have the right accent or British accent. I have my own Nigerian accent. I don't have probably the right tone of voice because sometimes some people who say Nigerians can laugh loud, they're loud
That's
and
wonderful. I love that, Buki. Let's laugh.
So when I started engaging in different spaces, especially academic spaces, I had the sense of feeling of being out of place. Yeah.
Mm,
So when I started my doctorate education program in 2017, I started working in different care settings, being a domiciliary care worker, working in care homes from 2008 until 2015, until I got a job as NVQ assessor. So my social cultural background also contributed to me having inferiority complex. I can remember when we were going to the lecture theatre rooms from the ground floor of St. Augustine Library when I was studying in Canterbury. Even in the lift, whilst we're going up, I was in the lift with some of the cohort members that were head of departments. They were kind of head of schools, and I felt so small because I felt like, oh, who am I to be in the midst of everyone else, considering their own educational background,
mm,
considering their work experience. And during break times, I struggled to kind of communicate with anyone because I felt like, oh, there's going to be lots of awkwardness when they're saying things I wouldn't know, I wouldn't be able to relate. So sometimes I'll even run to my car during break times to speak to my husband, just to take myself away from having conversation
yes.
with people. So I really struggled with inferiority complex. But what I realized, or upon reflection, was that these feelings of inferiority complex was an interplay of my historical and cultural background,
Mhm.
because it wasn't like the people I was in their midst were making me uncomfortable, but it was the psychological barrier that I put in place that without knowing, it was unconscious to me. But this was through, again, colonial legacies from someone who has come from a Nigerian background, and the post colonial dynamics as well, and the intersections of race, age, and gender. Because while I was growing up, it was difficult for us to kind of be more vocal in a place where there are men, especially men who are more mature than you. There's
Mm,
that hierarchical order that, oh, you don't speak, or you're not allowed to talk when people are older than you and when they're men. And then me being in a cohort with men, white men, again, felt like, oh, I had to place more. I shouldn't occupy space. So I was uncomfortable, and I had the guilt of not meeting cultural expectations as well. And this silenced me most times during the lectures. But those emotions are supposed to be guides. They are not supposed to be distractions. And over time, it led me to stop measuring myself against dominant norms and to stop comparing myself to others. And again, as Beach 2011 says in relation to the idea of liminality, there are some places that were places of discomfort became a creative space for me. And that was when I
mm,
was able to engage in that learning activity I told you before. And that helped me to reimagine who I am, to understand that I shouldn't belong to groups because they're giving me permission to become to belong. I should just bring my own self, be authentic to myself in different spaces. And that kind of helped me within my professional life as well, as I centered my work on inclusive literature, on promoting diverse cultural narratives. And personally, I see authenticity as the foundation of belonging. Once you bring your own self, once you bring your true self to a place, your belonging is not defined by others' opinion about you. And that helped me also to promote the importance of decolonizing education practices,
Mm.
and that became like pivotal within my thesis. And that kind of helped me to kind of reimagine myself, that this is the kind of work I want to champion, how to promote inclusive practices and help people who are like me to feel like they can belong if they bring their authentic self to a place.
Yeah. And I think maybe this is maybe the culture of competition, right? And comparison, of always comparing things, or you should be like that, or why aren't you like that? Well, because we're not, because we're different. And because we are, yeah, authentic the way we are and beautiful the way we are, and we own it. And looking back, Buki, at moments of awakening, what would you say stand out for you, where writing became more than storytelling and turned into a catalyst for personal and, why not, collective transformation?
Somewhere along the line, writing became more than just storytelling for me, through autoethnography, because I could connect my lived experiences of migration, of race, and academic belonging to wider structures and histories. From the age of 6, I grew up with the knowledge that the West is best, because everything that comes from the West is
Yes.
glorified. And at that time in Nigeria, I believe that I was so privileged when I was in primary school that my head teacher was white. I told you that my dad was passionate about education and educating his girls, so he made sure he put us in the best school
Mm.
that he could afford at the time. I had access to Western books such as Goldilocks and the Three Bears, Little Red Riding Hood, but what was missing at that time that I didn't engage with was books that were written by Nigerian authors. The only Nigerian book that I read at that time that I can remember was Eze Goes to School. And that was about a boy who grew up or who went to school from using Nigerian perspective.
Mm.
But all the while I was reading books that had apples in it, but in Nigeria then I didn't know apples. We had mangoes, we had guavas, but the books I read had a lot of Western stories, things that sometimes I couldn't relate to because they were not things within local community. But again, I felt so privileged when I relocated to England and decided to do my master's degree and then a doctorate, because that is the dream of every young Nigerian as well, to travel abroad, to study abroad, and everything else. So, in a way, it felt like, oh, I was privileged when I was young, I was privileged again as I came to England and studied again in the UK.
Mhm.
But during my doctorate program in my 5th year, I then realized that, there was that moment of realization that came, and I began to question everything because I saw history repeat itself in the pattern from my childhood. Because um, when I was in primary, I had access to Western books, and then when I was doing my literature review, I was doing my thesis, I only had access again mostly to um, Western theories, to
Mhm.
Western literature. There were a few non-Western literature, but it wasn't as much as I would have expected at that time. And then it brought my attention, or I came across what Chimamanda Adichie warned about: the danger of a single story, how dominant narratives has been erasing non-Western perspectives in literature and in different phases of life. And somehow so work helped me to build that reflexive voice again that carries positionality, originality, and creativity. And for me, it became an act of resistance, because I felt like, oh, I should kind of challenge colonial legacies and how to resist institutional racism and things like that.
Mhm.
So in a way, I was able to do a bit more research about how to decolonize educational practices and how to promote inclusive literature.
Yeah, and I think there are a lot of parallels there, especially for people who are coming from to the Western world, right? And I can relate to that. It's how we feel, how we want to um, interact, engage. And I know let's explore a bit the reflexive writing, because I think it's very useful for our audience who perhaps might not be aware. How can you use reflecting writing to deeply reflect on personal thoughts and emotions? And I know you haven't, maybe you can walk us through your process of reflecting writing, where you include methods like using different fonts. I want to hear more about that to distinguish narrative thoughts and feelings.
Thank you for that question. When I started my thesis stage, I had the conversation with my supervisor about how to go about the autoethnography
Mhm.
thesis I was going to write. And she said, "Oh, Buki, you have to have your data and then you need to analyze the data." And I was like, "Oh, that's true." Um, and in a way, I felt like I needed to separate the data
Yes.
from the analysis. And how was I going to do that? And then I came across a piece of writing someone did, where she used her she used a different font to write thoughts, her feelings,
Mhm.
and the narratives is itself. And then I felt, oh, I was going to, since I was typing, I don't really like to see my handwriting.
Right.
I felt like, okay, I was going to use a font that looks like handwriting,
Yes.
so as to differentiate the emotions, the thoughts, the narratives from the analysis. Because with autoethnography, it is good for you to explore your lived experiences, your narratives, your feelings, with theories, and not just kind of dump the narratives there. You
Mhm.
need to kind of explore them further. Yeah. And then with the collection of the data, I found out that I did more of the writing overnight and
Mm.
early hours of the morning, because that was when my memory was at its best. And
Mhm.
sometimes I have a good sleep and I wake up around 3 o'clock, and then I do some writing at that time. And but what made me a bit more successful when I was in the reflexive writing was to not just think about what happened or what
Mm.
was the story at that time, to also think about what was going through my mind, what was going
Mm.
through my thoughts, how was I feeling,
Mm.
and able to kind of write it down as well, because that I counted as data as well.
Mhm.
Yeah, so reflexive writing can take different forms depending on how people want to go about it. Sometimes you might think it's not important, but it might be important. But it's
Mm.
good to sometimes write things down when you feel like something has happened, or something
Yes.
may is going through your mind, or you're feeling about something. You
Yes.
should write it down, because someday that will be your data.
Yes. And right from that, how can that be therapeutic as we write to make sense of ourselves?
Yeah, so sadly, in May, uh, I had to put my dog to sleep based on neurological damage that they say he might not recover from, and I really struggled emotionally after all that happened. But what helped me to cope within the few days after he passed was I sat down and I wrote how I was feeling and
Yes.
what happened during that time, and somehow it became therapeutic for me because it helped me to process the grief. It
Yeah.
helped me to kind of think about how I would have want to see him. Would I have want to see him in pain? Would I have want to just keep him for selfish reasons?
Mm.
And sometimes writing can provide us with that space to reflect on so many things. And for me, in that instance, writing became very therapeutic for me. And in the sense of my writing as well, when I was writing my thesis, there were some aspects of my life that I was not particularly happy about, but I
Mhm.
couldn't change. But in a way, writing about those times, writing about what happened became therapeutic for me because I was
Yeah.
able to reconcile my past and reconcile how I've come off or how I've coped through life against all odds and where I am now. So writing has kind of provided me with some comfort and even become soul work for me, as I
Yes.
said earlier. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Buki, and I can relate to that. I think, yeah, writing is it's so powerful when we need to express how we feel, and also to kind of reflect and then see how we feel. I think it's such a beautiful process of yeah, like individual therapy, I would say. And now, in closing, what advice would you give to others looking to use writing for personal growth?
Oh, thank you. So, over time, my writing journey has taught me that the in between, which is the liminal spaces, is just not a place of loss, and it shouldn't be a place of loss because sometimes it can be a place where we say we struggle and we're feeling out of place. But it
Mhm.
should be a place of creation, it should be a place of creativity,
Mhm.
because for me, it was where my Nigerian heritage and my British academic speak to each other, where my vulnerability became strength, and where telling my story will also give room for others to tell their story. So for me, writing is no longer about words on a page because as soon as you're happy to share with people, it becomes your voice and it
Yeah.
becomes courage and it becomes the power to transform not only ourselves but our spaces that we inhabit. So to finish this off, I'll kind of close with the words from Mohamed Katani.
Mhm.
He's a Saudi Arabian engineer who won the Toastmasters World Championship for public speaking. And in his own words, he said, words have power, words are power, and words could be your power, and you can change a life and inspire the nation with your own words.
Ah, that's very beautiful. Well, thank you, Buki, for sharing your stories, your powerful story, and your examples, and also your journey of self discovery and education. And I think this will serve as inspiration for our audience. And yeah, best of luck of yeah, just being your authentic self.
Thank you.